I woke up to the news that Keir Starmer has resigned as Prime Minister of the UK. Now, I don't agree with it. I haven't understood why people are on his back all the time, why people keep calling for his resignation. The real problem is there's a disparity in society. There's the uneducated, so there's the impressionable. There's people who have no values, so there's no loyalty, and opportunists. And the reality is, if you actually look at society as a whole, rarely do people support success. They don't really support a success story. People tend to cheer when things go bad. You know, that's just how people are. It's a bit, society is actually quite morbid. That's how I see it. So when someone's on the top, all of a sudden people hate them for it. When someone is opposing that, people love them for it. So people are never happy. Doesn't matter what decision gets made, they're not happy. So it doesn't matter who replaces him and who comes after and after and after. It will always be a failure in the eyes of people because you can't please everyone. And most people, like I said, most people are self-serving. Especially in government, I find politics shady as shit. Like people just stab you in the back constantly in politics. It's crazy to me. Look, I don't follow every single aspect of politics. I see it in a glance, and sometimes I invest time and actually listen and take it on board. But I wouldn't say recently I've really been delving too deep into it. But I've been confident enough with the way he's carried himself. You know, I've actually liked how Starmer's been. One of his weaknesses, I would suggest, is his lack of charisma. He doesn't come across as someone as personable. You don't feel magnetized to him. So he doesn't really have that charisma. But then do you really need that? Now, some people might think you do. Well, I don't necessarily think that matters too much. I think what matters is your morals. And he seems to have that in spades. I appreciate that. And I've spoke about him in the past, in the sense that you have to ask, with people of positions of power leadership, especially when they're supposed to be the voice of the people, you have to ask yourself, do I trust them? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that laugh at that and go, oh my God, but they're going to laugh at anyone because they're sheep. Too many people are impressionable. So they go on social media, people round on them. Well, guess what? They do for content anyway. And a lot of people are racist, which is why they gravitate to the Reform Party and why they love Trump. So that we go on to that. Well, you ask, does someone have values? They have principles they stick by. So are they honourable? With Starmer, I absolutely do feel he is incredibly honourable. So what's so bad about that? You know, if you look at who he's replaced, we've had charlatans, absolute charlatans. We've had the waffler in Boris Johnson. My God, he lied out of his arse all the time. That's why he bumbles all the time. He comes across as someone that's fun. You think you can get along with him and have a little joke. That's not a leader, though. That's not honourable. You might say, oh, I like him. He has charisma. You know, that's the sort of personality I like. Well, go and have fun with him. Go to a party with him. That's not the leader of a country. This is someone who lied continuously, tells you one thing, does the opposite. Never has a straight answer. Full-on politician. So do they have honour? No. Do they have integrity? No, they don't. They were lying out their arse. And then we get Rishi Sunak. I watched his the election process for him. I can't remember what you call it now. Where there was like 3 of them, I think it was. They were all vying to be the next Prime Minister. And I watched him on the live debates. And he sold a pipe dream. Everything he said is what the people wanted to hear. Then he came into office and he went against every single principle that he'd been elected for. Like everything he had said, the manifesto stuff, it was complete lies. I mean, it turns out he's actually a billionaire or whatever he is. He's like a very wealthy individual. So he didn't have the best interests of the people at heart. Now I've got a bit of an issue here. My system for some reason just overloaded as I said that. I don't know why. It might have sent my microphone out of sync. I don't know. I'm hoping it hasn't because sometimes it does that when we go there. But the reality is those that have come before Starmer haven't been good at all. Like, I'm trying to think now, when have we ever had a positive Prime Minister? And I know some people are going to think this is absolutely bizarre to say, but he's the best of the ones we've had. When I think about it, we've had Tony Blair who took us into the Iraq War, and then there's been a lot of shady goings on with him in terms of the people he's associated with and he has links to ever since he left office. So it's like, wait a minute. So how corrupt were you in office? He seemed like a good leader. Like when he was talking on camera, the decisions he was making at the time, you thought, oh, he's a state leader, and he's probably the most confident one we've had, who actually, presents well. Because after that, I think we had was it Dave Blunkett or something? I can't remember. Then we had I can't remember all their names. I know the faces. And even in Labour government, they've had. I think the real problem is we look at faces sometimes. You look at a face and think, is that someone I like or trust? And if it doesn't, I don't like them. And it's a face. It's simply a face. And like I said, if you go far enough back, it's just I don't know where we've had really, really good state leaders. And I think Starmer was doing his best. Now, again, I think it's just popular to round on people. And social media creates this witch hunt. But I'd love people to come up with a list of all the things that Starmer did that was broken. So when I say that, it's like all the things did he promise something and didn't deliver on it? Now, there's going to be some things because your hands are tied behind your back to a degree. There's contracts, there's having to keep everybody on side. So I think there's times when you maybe you had the best of intention for something, but you couldn't fulfill it. And that happens in politics. Because it's in some regards, it is like a popularity contest. To get one thing over the line, you have to do deals with other people in Parliament to get them to agree to this, that's politics, though. So has he delivered on a lot of things? Look, be honest, I think his authority as a state leader, it couldn't have been better. He supported Ukraine. Now, some people might not agree with supporting Ukraine because, again, too many people are self-serving. They don't care about anything other than themselves. So when they have privilege, and freedom is a privilege that not everybody gets around the world. So it's not always about wealth when we talk about privilege. It's the opportunity you have. Some people feel that the sun shines out their arse. Because they were born with a specific privilege, they don't like the fact that others can encroach upon how unique that privilege is. Okay, hence racism. And they'll hide behind all these different things. Yes, there's attacks in society. Yes, there's incidents. But there's also incidents of the other class and other races. So you could argue Muslims are the problem. You could say like black people are the problem if you want to be a racist individual. But I see an awful lot of white people doing an awful lot of bad things too. So it's not a race thing, is it? It's a human thing. It's a societal issue that fundamentally is a human issue too. So it's not always about race and class. There's a lot of shady shit that goes on, even amidst the white population. So I hate racism, and unity is always key. And when I look at Starmer, he is someone I feel has integrity. So when I see him like standing up for Ukraine, that's really important because a lot of people, again, they're in their ivory tower. They think the UK is so far away from the battlefield, it doesn't matter. The world is an unstable place. When you give a tyrant the opportunity to enact strength and start to embolden itself, where does it end? We end up in World War III and you get Europe invaded again. So you could argue that Ukraine is the frontier. Once Ukraine is taken, all of a sudden you've got Poland, Germany. It's just it happens all over again, and it's just one nation after another as it encroaches upon the continent. So Ukraine is important, but even if you took it away from a strategic point of view, human life matters. This is a tyrant trying to dominate and usurp and actually exterminate a whole nation of people just because they don't agree with their values and who they want to be. So a lot of Ukrainians want to be part of Western civilization. They don't want to be part of this dictatorial regime. They want to have freedom to express. They want to have an identity. These are values and principles everybody should have the opportunity to have. Again, this isn't all about politics. This is what I think. I think in general terms because I can't help if I'm someone that thinks of a utopia. It's a pipe dream at the moment, but I think of a utopia where everybody is fair with each other, harmony exists, and there's no need for violence, there's no need for revenge, there's no need for anything corrupt and undignified. Everything is just beautiful and bliss. And that is a pipe dream, isn't it? At the moment. But if we were to head toward a utopia, how would we get there and what would it look like? Having people doing shady politics where they stab you in the back all the time and everybody wants to be a leader, that's not going to be a utopia. It's people with humility, people that are humble, people that care about other people, and people that have dignity, where they'll take personal sacrifice for the wider gain. And someone who is prepared to resign as a leader, I think that shows an awful lot of honour. Because you only have to look across the sea and think about Trump. Is Trump ever going to leave dignified? Of course he's not, because he's a tyrant. He has no dignity, he has no honour. So this is a guy that has no social etiquette. He thinks he's above everybody. So that's an authoritarian. If you think about a utopia, is a head of state or someone in a council to decide to make decisions for the wider people, is someone like that really going to be good? Because he's just going to ignore everybody and just think he's the most important person. He wants to be a king. It's a joke. In the UK, we have Nigel Farage, who's very similar to that. Talks out of his arse all the time, tells people what they want to hear, but he just regurgitates shit. It doesn't make sense, and he contradicts himself all the time. He has no integrity, and he cannot be trusted. So I can't understand how people follow that. But again, they follow social media, where people sell them a pipe dream. But it's not sending you to utopia. It's sending us to the abyss. And it's like, I can see it, and I just think this is not a world that's being created and curated for the people. It's for the millionaires, the billionaires, the people in power who just want to keep having power and keep diminishing people's human rights. So if you look at Reform, they hide a lot of their manifesto because a lot of it is just made up on the go anyway, which is why the contradictions exist. But Farage is very racist. He's very radicalized, and he's influenced a lot by money. So he gets a lot of bribes. He just doesn't reveal it. Then it comes out in the media, and all of a sudden he just doesn't know anything about it, or it's not that big a deal. It's like one deal was £5 million, and he made decisions in Parliament in favour of the company that supported him. He's just corrupt as far as it can go, and he wants to abolish the NHS. And if anyone knows anything about America, it's dangerous as shit because it is out of control. It's the Wild West in terms of healthcare. Farage adores Trump, and he would love to just do nothing more than to mirror him and be the Trump of the UK. The scary thing about it is there's a lot of people in the UK who absolutely adore Trump because either they're uneducated or they're self-serving and they're selfish and they just don't care about anything other than their own privilege. So they validate it all by saying, oh, he's going to help give me everything. It's like, oh my God, you're delusional. He'll give himself everything. He doesn't care about you. What would happen if Farage became Prime Minister and Reform took over? It would be absolute anarchy. You'd have a guy giving out contracts left, right and centre because people giving him handouts. All of a sudden, his wealth just goes through the roof. People are paying out their asses just to see a doctor. Everything's private. So the nationalisation diminishes. And then we end up with this healthcare system where only the wealthy can access healthcare. And the impoverished die early. Because they can't seek healthcare. I mean, you already see it anyway, because if you don't have to go so far as deep into the healthcare, but if you look at the dentistry, it's so hard for many people to get on the NHS for the dentist, so they have to go private. Some people can't afford it. It's not like mad amounts of money, but it's something that most of us are not used to paying, and it's prohibitively expensive for simple procedures. So a lot of people either try to take care of their teeth on their own, they try to, which I think is mad because there can be complications, or they don't see a dentist at all. And that's a crisis. And that's just teeth. What about your actual health to guarantee life is preserved? That is scary to think that people who can't even afford the dentist would then need to find the money to live. The US model, I think, is frightening, and that's where Farage is building towards. I don't want to go too far talking about other politicians and things, but if we look into the past, there's been a lot of shady shit. We see a lot of contracts between in the Conservative Party across both terms. When you had Boris Johnson and we had Sunak, it was just dodgy as shit. We're just getting contracts for the best friends, and they were becoming wealthy. It wasn't in the best interest of people. There was one part I remember. I think it was a deal they did in China. I can't remember what it was. I think it was for I don't know if it was masks. There was something it was, wasn't it? For it was definitely for health, and it was the wrong style or something, and it wasn't fit for purpose, and there was an awful lot of money thrown into that. That was corrupt at its core. That was money thrown away, but where did the money, it trickles all over the place. It's like dodgy contract here, dodgy contract there. And that's what we have. We have shady politics, and I just feel personally, whether Starmer got everything right, I think it's irrelevant. I felt he had honour. And he was doing the things the right way. People are not always going to agree. This is the thing about politics. You can't hate it. You could have 100 people in a room. It's going to be hard to make even half of them happy. It's just everybody, different demographics, different principles, different wants, different needs. So, like, for instance, he's recently announced the banning of under 16s from social media, which I am actually in favour for. I've said it before. I think parents should have autonomy over themselves and be able to nurture the youth and their children, of course. I think too much government control is not good. But it's a lot of, being totally transparent, honest, there's a lot of shit parents out there who don't nurture their children. They don't spend time with them. So they don't understand right from wrong or basic principles in life. So they have no boundaries. There's a lot of youth are running rampant. You see it at the moment. You get these organised meetings, these organised groups, and they cause absolute havoc in neighbourhoods. Even become arsonists and attacks. And then there's a lot of people that attack people, record it, and put it on social media and things just for notoriety. So it emboldens them. There's all these different things, and they get impressioned at a young age. They're impressioned by other people who they have a vindictive nature to them. So you might watch a content creator and think, oh, I like these, they're entertaining or whatever it is, and then you start sharing their values, and you start behaving like them, mirroring them. They have no virtues, These people are just opportunists. So it's not good for the youth, the younger generation, to be impressioned early on by these inept leaders, really, or influencers. I don't like that. I think you should give them a chance to grow and nurture and become who they are at their core, and then they can see what's really happening on the outside. But I think allow them to nurture on the inside, and then hopefully the youth will stabilize, really. But I mean, I can understand the argument against it, about rights and freedom and all that stuff and oppression. I get it, but the problem is, if you look, it's running rampant now. The social media is too divisive, and it's not regulated in any way. And again, talk about regulation. Okay, it goes the other way, doesn't it, about freedom? But I think something has to be done because people are getting radicalized. That's the deeper issue, radicalization, and that's why I'm in favor of it, because I think there needs to be something centralizing this to stop it from happening, because it's dangerous. Because again, talk about a utopia. Utopia, is based on freedom. But it's also about decency and respect. And too many people are self-serving. So how are we ever going to get to a world that's unified, where people share common values, of basic principles of freedom, expression, and all those things, but no radicalization exists? Because there's no reason to exploit others. And I know this goes way beyond Starmer, but I can't think of another prime minister. And this is the thing, like, people can have a dislike for someone, but mention someone that was better. The only person that comes to mind, and this was before my time, and a lot of people don't hate them to the core, and that's Margaret Thatcher. From my understanding, she created an awful lot of change. She pissed a lot of people off in the process, but she's someone that made things happen. And when I hear the name Margaret Thatcher, I think of someone who is forthright in their beliefs. They stand by their convictions. They do make the hard decisions, but they do it for the right reasons. That's what I think of when I think of her, based on what I've heard of her. I might be wrong, but just because people don't like the result, or they don't like how headstrong she was, or the decision, or the way it was destabilizing the status quo, if they're doing it for the right reasons, then you can trust them, can't you? So when I think of prime ministers I trust based on experience, the ones I don't trust, these are probably the only two. Margaret Thatcher, and I think Starmer. I don't agree with everything Starmer's done. I can't remember every little thing, but I do remember when the Labour come into office, they weren't 100% what they agreed to do, and that irritated me. I can't remember all the things now, but I don't think it was necessarily him, though, because he had people underneath him. He had to help the education secretary, then you've got, whoever's in charge of the treasury. There was different things, and it was all going a bit crazy because people went on a power trip. But I don't think that was necessarily Starmer. I think there's others in their positions, and people have been moved on since then. And it seems to have stabilised from what I've seen. It's all stabilised within government more. But people are always self-preserving. So where's the big issue come? From my point of view, the big issues come from reform. There's a worry that Labour don't win the next election because reform government, Farage, have had a real hold in the UK. And you see it all the time. Again, this racism, this fascism, it's just wrong. And again, people are easily influenced. So what it really is, the Reform Party is hiding under the mantra that we're going to make Britain better, but great again. And they're trying to make it seem like it's patriotic. It's the patriotic party. It's really not. If you actually look at the party, and I've been laughing the whole way through, is Conservative was shady as shit. Everything they said they'd do, they didn't do. They went the opposite. Everything was corrupt government contracts, money coming out left, right, and centre here, taxing people heavily here. It's just, it was all crazy. You couldn't trust the damn thing they said, ever. I already was sceptical about reform anyway. And then slowly but surely, there was Conservative MPs jumping ship. They were denouncing the Conservative Party, jumping over to reform. So surely, once you've got enough of them going over there, reform is just another Conservative party. And we've already seen that Conservatives can't be trusted based on the previous administrations multiple times over. Then we've got a leader in Farage who genuinely can't be trusted. He lies out of his arse. When he's challenged on things, he said he wouldn't raise council tax, and then he raised council tax in his constituency. And he was questioned about that, and evidence was put to him, and he just kept lying. Said, I never said that. I never said that. It's like, mate, it's proof. It's here. You've even said it on camera. But they don't, because they've got no actual manifesto, they make it up as they go along. So whatever can convince you right now that this is going to get you to vote for me is what I'm going to say now. That's what they're like. So they forget half the things they're saying because all they want is the immediate result. And I've always spoke about that, about short-term thinking and long-term thinking. Reform is all built on short-term thinkers. So they come up with short-term answers. And it never makes sense because they've actually got no program in place. It's all about just picking people who already have a fan base or a loyalty or something like this, or just known for that. And it just makes them seem prepared, but they aren't. And it's an absolute mess. And I think I find it quite frightening, the idea of reform coming into government, in all honesty. They're charlatans. That's how I see it. I see it as bandits. That's what it is. It's bandits coming in just to try and take out as much money as they possibly can and exploit people for their own greed and gain in pursuit of power and wealth. And they're going to pretend to you that it's for you, your patriotism, and the fact that, you know, they're trying to segregate people by creating division. Because if you actually listen, this is what people need to do. They need to step out of the bubble of social media and the impressionable nature of how everything is, and just start looking at listening to what people are saying. Like, take the time to actually listen to them. Go and listen to Nigel Farage sound bites over a period of time. Take the time to actually pay attention to what he's saying, because there's no point just keep jumping on a party and going, oh, I love this. Oh, yeah, he's saying what I want to hear. Forget that. Go and listen to him on a consistent basis. Spend an hour just going through some stuff he says without bias. That's where it's important. We don't have bias. We just listen and then look at the actions. He has no honor, no dignity. He's just like that market trader, you know. He's just dodgy as shit. I don't trust him at all, Farage. And I don't like Trump one bit. He's a liar. He's a criminal. He doesn't stand for anything other than his own personal wealth and his family's wealth and self-preservation. That's Donald Trump. He's just been given a very, very powerful position in office, which only came about the very first time because Americans were just fed up with politics in general. They saw someone who was supposedly a business leader because he was on The Apprentice, and he's supposed to be the business leader. That's why they're on there. So they saw someone who could help fix the financial situation in America and make it fair again, because that's what he pretends to be. And both times he's messed up. You know, you just get people that jump on the bandwagon. Again, it's because it's what it is people fall out of love of politics. They don't trust it. So they just think, this is my savior. This is the person that's going to come and save the whole thing, and it's going to change everything, and we can all start to really, really thrive now. These people just exploit an opportunity. That's all it is. So when you don't like Starmer, it's like, for what though? Okay, he doesn't speak with like a deep voice. He hasn't got a massive persona. So he's not very charismatic. He doesn't maybe hold authority in a room. Maybe that's a problem. But diplomatic-wise, for his diplomacy, I think he's done incredibly well. He stood up to Trump when most people wouldn't. And Farage would have caved, because he already said he was arguing, because he always goes opposing. You don't actually know what Farage wants, because he always does the opposite, because he does it on purpose so he can feel that need. All of a sudden say, oh, that's a bad decision. Everything's a bad decision to him. He can never come out and say, oh, I would have done that. No. He has to go opposite all the time. He's unstable. So Starmer goes against Trump, which is a good idea, because the problem is Trump is a criminal. And really now he's a war criminal, because he's joined with Israel and they've done some dodgy shit, and it's war crimes. So if the UK had joined Trump, we would be war criminals too as a nation, which is why we didn't allow America to use our air bases to attack Iran. And a lot of European nations also vetoed it too, because it's a criminal act. There was no justification to do it. And it was attacking civilian locations, where we see that school blown up. And that's really where the issue is. So Trump can keep shouting over, saying everybody's got no respect, that we're doing all this. Trump is a charlatan. He creates a war, and then the chaos after, and then he acts like he's the salvation when he's having to fix the issue. And then he acts like he's doing a favor. So the Strait of Hormuz, it gets shut down, and now they've got to try and clear it. And as they're clearing it, he says, "You know what? We're the saviors. People should be like applauding us. They should be paying us to clear this. You created the mess. Why would we? Why should other people pay for your failures?" It's just this is the corruption with Trump, though. He waffles around everything. So he's a leader you can't trust. He has no dignity. He's not someone that would gracefully leave office. You have to drag him out of office. He would say everything's lies, it's fake. Corruption and all this shit. He's the corrupt official. And he's the head of the country. It's crazy to me. And Farage would do the same. But people can't say that about Starmer, because he's had the dignity and the decency to say, I haven't got the support of my party, for whatever reason that is, which I think is just other people, they're self-preserving, and they've seen the power of reform coming through. And, of course, they all want to be promoted. And that's what it is. Politics is shady as shit. As soon as you can get an opportunity, there's snakes. You've got to be careful what you wish for with politics. You lose one, you get a worse one. And I think that a lot. So I'm looking at this other guy. I can't. Barnum, is it Barnum? I can't remember the names. I've never even heard of him before, so I don't know how popular he is. But Burnham, is it? I don't freaking know. But the way he's come in doesn't make me feel too confident about him, because that says a lot about people, like how shady they are as they come in, because they always have to start making these murmurs, saying, "Oh, this you can't trust Starmer. He's doing a poor job." Blah blah blah. And then they start to rally people around them. So then you have to ask the question, how did they become so popular? And how did they make it here? Because has it been with dignity? Or has it been shady as shit? So personally, as this transition changes, and there's a real big chance this guy's going to become the next prime minister, it's like I'm going to be very, very suspicious of him, because of how they got the opportunity and the fact they've had to push someone out who I felt was doing a good job. Because it's subjective what people think, but I think on the world stage is really important. How the UK carries itself, so how we're recognised. And it seemed to me like he got on well with Macron from France, other nations. I just see him with all these state leaders, and they all seem to respect him. And Starmer stepped up when times were hard. He unified an awful lot of the coalition. So I said it. I pulled it ages ago. I said when Trump come to office, he's going to be the bully, and it's really important people stand up to a bully. And I said this, that I hope to God other countries don't just submit to him, because if they can stand up, all of a sudden America becomes isolated, and then Trump's power is diminished. But if you embolden him, it gets worse. And what happened? The UK stood up against him on moments when they had to. Europe stood up against him. All of a sudden, Canada was standing up. China obviously having their arguments back and forth with America, but countries were coming together and they were unifying, and a big part of that was Starmer. And I just don't understand how people keep putting him down and saying all these bad things. But I'm looking at a state leader who's actually standing up to aggression, and I think he's done brilliant with Trump. Because the real thing is, like, people have these rose-tinted glasses with politics and leaders and all sorts. It's not always how you want it. You know, a good leader can have etiquette, and they pick their timing and they do the right thing because it goes against your own ego. It goes for the people. So me personally, I'd love to tell Trump he's an absolute prat of a human being. He's just undignified and a piece of shit. But as a state leader, you have to bite your tongue sometimes, don't you? Because it's not about you and him. It's about the people. And is it fair for people to suffer because of your opinion towards someone? And this is where a state leader has to bite their tongue sometimes and be accountable. And he's done brilliant with Trump. It's evident he doesn't like him because they're completely at odds, different mentalities, moralities. And Trump always making digs at Starmer. And it'd be easy for Starmer to take a dig back, but he doesn't really do it. He does it in a very, very articulated way because he has intelligence and he's mindful. And what it is, it goes beyond Trump. The UK, of course, still wants to have a positive relationship with the United States of America beyond Trump's term. So what you don't want to do is damage all relations with America as a country just because Trump is a petulant president. Because, you know, the connection will outlive Trump. And that's really why Starmer is playing the long game with Trump. It's waiting for him to leave office. Unfortunately, Starmer didn't last as long. And again, it's just because public opinion. But people are just easily manipulated. And you've got to be so careful with social media. And I'd say be very, very careful with Farage and his goons. I would really be careful of Reform. You know, it's a brand new party, for crying out loud. And they've never, ever stood by anything they say. They've got no basic principle that just stands around, and that's what they stand by. They're just a racist party. And this racism is terrible. The way people are in their own country is crazy because a lot of people travel when they go on holiday. In their own country, like where they are, they become racist, don't they? They don't want foreigners and stuff, but it's okay for other people to be foreigners. And I see this all the time where people, maybe they want to have a new experience and they say, I want to live in, let's say you want to go and live in Spain. Then they get annoyed that there's all these visa applications and the bureaucracy to be able to get the opportunity to live in Spain. Now, you could argue people are coming over to the UK, exploiting the system, and they're coming here easily. That's a different thing entirely. You know, that's something for the Home Secretary to get under control. You know, come up with a plan that actually works. And they've all had issues with it. But avoiding all of that, I always find British people, particularly hypocrites, and Americans. It's always the ones who have privilege. You'll keep talking about privilege. It is a privilege of freedom. Because they have a specific privilege where they live in nations where other people would dream of being. So you have a luxury that you're given at birth. It's not a financial luxury, but a luxury of freedom or a certain democracy, a certain way, culture you live in is a level of freedom. So many people would love to live in America, but they can't. People love to live in the UK, but they can't. But because we have this luxury, people feel entitled. So let's say you're a British citizen and you want to live anywhere in the world. You feel you should be able to just do that. I'm British. Of course I can live there. You know, I'm a high class of person. That's disproportionate. Just because you're from a country and that's your nationality does not make you a better human being than anybody else on the planet. And that's where I get fed up. And that's where I talk about unity and you talk about utopia. We're only as strong as our weakest link. I'm always saying that. We're only as strong as our weakest link. And I've said it before. If I could change one thing in the world, and you just thought one thing, one place in the world I could change. I mean, it'll be funny. There's too much in the world that does need changing. But if I could click my fingers, and it's not about a culture. You can't just change a culture. You can't just go and change sort of religions, ideals. I mean, obviously, it depends what you want to do. But I guess if you overthink it, I'm not really thinking in that terms. I'm just thinking in terms of upgrade, infrastructure upgrade. Let's talk about that. That's really where I'm coming from. If I could click my fingers and there's an infrastructure upgrade, I would click my fingers and the entire continent of Africa is what I would fix. Because Africa is exploited an awful lot for their minerals, especially by the West and America. So the money they gets hemorrhaged out of the country. Of course, there's all these other contracts, and but the problem is we also have leaders, African leaders, who are they're corrupt. Yeah, so they have their own little personal military, there's corrupt officials. You hear it all the time. So it's really hard to actually do that. Because of the corruption, it's hard to invest in Africa and the money go to the people and the infrastructure rather than the corrupt officials, which just creates a spiral of poverty and depravity. But if the whole infrastructure, the entire continent of Africa, which is huge, and I think Africa is far bigger than the average person thinks it is, it's massive. But there's a lot of poverty coming from Africa. And when you think about migration, you've got to think about, this is where you've got to, it's a bit like if you saw a school of fish and they were just, you just saw them erratic and they're just going flying away. You innately know there's a predator. That means there's a predator. They wouldn't, that's not their natural behavior. That's a predator. So if people, especially from the African continent, are flocking and flooding to Europe, they're not flooding to the Middle East, are they? They're flooding to Europe. So that suggests that Europe has the values that they seek, the opportunities they seek as well. So you would argue then that Europe is like a blueprint, I guess. The way civilization is a good blueprint for maybe the rest of the world. Now, a big statement to make, but the point is, if everybody's if so many are flocking from one region to another, you've got to ask, what are they flocking from? Is it poverty, or is it corruption, or is it both? And if there was a way to galvanize the region and really have huge investment there, I mean, think how it could thrive. If the minerals stayed in their own country, for instance, and they were, I can just imagine it now. Who's trying to go where now? You know, you see it now, don't you? I mean, not being funny, it wasn't long ago people had an issue with the Middle East and Asia. And now, all of a sudden, you've got a lot of people, even British people, moving to Dubai. Why are they moving to Dubai? Because a lot of luxury and it's a tax haven. They don't have to pay taxes. People don't want to contribute to society. So, it doesn't make sense. If racism is that powerful, why are people flocking to regions where they've always had issues with? So if Africa was really, really prominent and it was luxurious, would people from the UK, for instance, who are hardline racist, or maybe not those ones, but would people in the UK flock to Africa? I think so. I think people would. You think maybe they start to forget about the colour issues of colour, race, culture. Because look, I don't know everything about Africa. But, you know, I know there's a lot of crime. There's crime everywhere in the world. When we think of culture, though, I see a lot of beauty around the world, though. I see the negative and I see the beauty. For me personally, Africa's too dangerous for me to go to. I would feel. Only because there's too much corruption. I wouldn't feel safe in any nation in Africa, personally. But that's just because that's just the way it is, though. And I just think that's really sad. Because on the other side of that, I see a beautiful culture. Of course, I know every country is going to be unique in the same way every country is unique across Europe. But there's a lot of vibrancy about Africa. And I love the fact that they're like, again, every country is going to be unique. But on the whole, when you think of the continent, I see people dancing. I see an awful lot of colour, flamboyance in that sense, you know, community. So there's a lot of beauty, even in impoverished regions. They can still make themselves smile and have community, you know, and all these different things. Because the human spirit is quite powerful, you know. And I just think it's about, so when I was going back there, when I said about like we're only as strong as our weakest link, for me, that's the weakest link because the level of poverty that goes on there and the corruption. Now, another weak area, of course, we could start picking at countries that have dictators in charge and they're just completely at odds with the rest of the world. So they create this isolated despot of a region where it destabilizes all the time. So I think North Korea and Russia would be prime examples of that. If they were more engaging and open to other ways of thinking and allow people to merge, you know, rather than being authority all the time. The world would know a better peace. But then you think about South America and it's just full of drugs, cartels, there's a lot of violence, a lot of deaths. It's just, that's a very dangerous region, very volatile region. So if you think about regions of the world, it's probably the most dangerous region in the world, isn't it? South America, probably, I would suggest. And it's like, should we really know danger to that extent? But how do you change an entire society? You know, so in the UK we don't have it to that extent. Of course, we have issues, and there are problems across widespread areas of society, of course. But I think when it comes to leaders in parliament and government, it's just can you trust them? Like I say, with Starmer, I felt he had integrity, and I think that's really important because I don't feel he does decisions that favour him. He makes big decisions that maybe people won't understand yet, or they won't always agree with, but he's doing the best he can. And I can respect that. We're all going to make mistakes in life. We're all going to make it difficult. Maybe he gives someone a position of authority and power who really undermines his authority and leadership, and it all breaks from within. Because that's probably what's been happening, really. You know, you give someone this position. There was his, I don't know if it was one of the, I don't know what one it was now, to be honest. One of his higher ups called for his resignation. You're thinking, well, he put you there. You have no loyalty. But anyway, I don't want to keep going around in circles. I just want people to think for themselves. Think of the world you would love to experience. What would get you there? And think of all the leaders in between. And I know some people see it as a ridiculous statement, but I think Starmer's probably the best we've had in a long time. And when I say a long time, I don't even know if there has been any better. Like they've been shit. They've been terrible. They really have. And I mean, I think the American presidents have been quite terrible in all honesty. But I'm starting to think maybe our prime ministers have been worse. That's a bad place to be. I did love Obama. There's a lot of people. Some people absolutely hated Obama, but then I think it's the racist people. It's usually the people of wealth, affluence, and the racist sect. So they didn't like the fact that he wasn't a white president. And there's some that didn't like the fact that he was trying to help the impoverished with his Medicaid. So he was doing everything he can to try to change the establishment. And, he had the best of intentions. But again, it's a bit like Starmer. You come in with the best of intentions. All of a sudden, you inherit this shit show where there's an awful lot of, what do you call it? Debt. There's a lot of national debt. You probably didn't realise the total extent. So now all of a sudden you've got to raise taxes. You've got to do things to try to get the debt down, because when you can neutralise it, all of a sudden you come from a position of power. So you have to make tough decisions. And I've said about this before. Sometimes in those positions, you're going to have to do things that don't make you favourable, but it's the best interest of the nation. So if you can get the national debt down in 10 years or something, it's going to be a lot of hardship with very little to show for it, because people will think we're paying more, but we're getting nothing out of it. But really, we're trying to neutralise the national debt, whereas a lot of other leaders will actually exacerbate the situation by increasing national debt, getting us further into the problem, all for their own popularity. Who would you rather invest in? You can't convince people of anything, can you? But I'm someone I stand on principle. I like the underdog winning, but I'm not an idiot that just follows someone just because they're considered the underdog. But I will stand by conviction, and I will always say what I think, even if it's unpopular. And I can't see many people stand up for Starmer. I have seen some nice comments on social media, sometimes on the odd post where people do come together and they say, I don't understand it either. But it's always these cowards that have the louder voice. It's always the ones that are just completely destabilizing. And they keep asking for change, but never know what change they seek. And the ones that do know what they seek, it's usually racist intentions. And I've already said how I see the world. And it's just, again, people self-preserving. That's part of the biggest issue, is this self-preservation of people's privilege. And that's just undignified.